Welcome to the Untold Stories of Black women in the women's suffrage movement. My name is Katie Hall, and I want you to join me as we explore women such as Susan B. Anthony and the role that she played in the suffrage movement, as well as women like Ida B. Wells and Anna Julia Cooper. Ida B. Wells was an African-American investigative journalist, educator, and an early leader in the civil rights movement. She was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She arguably became the most famous Black woman in America during a life that was centered on combating prejudice and violence. She also fought for equality for African Americans, especially women.
Ida B. Wells, she sort of like embodies everything that the suffrage movement was about, everything that rights for women and specifically about Black women were about. I mean, this is a woman who came from adversity. She lost her parents at a young age. She helped raise her siblings, but she was able to get herself educated and to make a big impact on the rights for not just Black women, but women in general and for Black people in general.
Wells was born into slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi, and freed by the Emancipation Proclamation during the American Civil War. In 1870, African American men were granted the right to vote with the ratification of the 15th Amendment. However, poll taxes, literacy tests, fear, intimidation, and later Jim Crow laws were used in former slaveholding states to keep them from exercising their right to vote. At the age of 16, Ida lost both of her parents and her infant brother in 1878 due to the yellow fever epidemic. Wells moved with some of the siblings to Memphis, Tennessee, where she found better pay as a teacher. Soon she co-owned and wrote for the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight newspaper. In the 1890s, Wells documented lynching in the United States through her indictment called Southern Horror's Lynch Laws in all of its phases. Investigating frequent claims of whites that lynchings were reserved for Black criminals only, Wells exposed lynching as a barbaric practice of whites in the South used to intimidate and oppress African Americans who created economic and political competition. In a subsequent threat of loss of power for whites, a white mob destroyed her newspaper office and presses as her investigative reporting was carried nationally in Black-owned newspapers. After being forced to leave Memphis because of the 1892 expose she wrote about a lynching, Ida B. Wells starts the Alpha Suffrage Club in Chicago, one of the first and most influential African American suffrage groups in Illinois. The group immediately sets out to mobilize and register Black men and women voters. In 1880s, Black reformers began organizing their own groups. In 1896, they founded the National Association of Colored Women, which became the largest federation of local Black women's clubs. Their motto was "Lifting as we climb."
22 women that did something a long time ago that were college students at the time are founders of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, of which I am a member, a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Those 22 women were college students, young women at the time, who saw the importance of the right to vote. So their first act of public service when they became an organization was marching in the Women's Suffrage March. Yes, they had to march in the back, but they were there, they were present, they were college students. And that took extreme bravery and extreme forethought, and for them to be, in their teens and 20s and leading in that way and leading the way for hundreds of thousands of women that are a part of the sorority now puts them on the top of my list as my heroes.
Stanton and fellow abolitionist Susan B. Anthony are introduced and quickly began collaborating on the women's suffrage movement. Their life work included fighting for both to end slavery and property ownership of women. Susan B. Anthony has become a controversial figure in recent years, as she is quoted saying that women deserve the vote more than Black men. Stanton, too, has been criticized for her views on extending voting rights to African Americans. She echoed Anthony's resentment that Black men were allowed to vote before women. The first Women's Rights Convention is held in Seneca Falls, New York, organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, who began drawing parallels between the condition of the enslaved population and their own condition as prisoners within a patriarchal society. Women from all over the United States and abroad traveled to Washington, D.C. to participate in the march. Paul, working with Mary Church Terrell, allowed African American women to participate, but they had to march in the back of the parade. Prominent leaders like Ida B. Wells didn't agree with this decision. While she started in the back with the rest of the Black women, she ran to the front once the parade began to join the women in her state's delegation. Wells was outspoken regarding her beliefs as a Black female activist and faced regular public disapproval, including that of leaders with diverging viewpoints from both the civil rights movement and the women's suffrage movement. Establishing several notable women's organizations, Wells was a skilled and persuasive speaker and traveled nationally and internationally on lecture tours. Anna Julia Cooper was born a slave August 10, 1858 in North Carolina. She graduated from Oberlin College in 1884. In 1902, she was named the principal at M Street High School, and she was an educator there through 1930. At the age of 67, she received her PhD in 1925.
So I think that we have come a long ways. If you look, you will see Black women in all professions doing all kinds of things. They're working as CEOs, they're partners, they're surgeons. So we are doing a lot of things. We've come a long way. However, we still face many of the same issues that we faced, maybe not so much in 1920, but we still face issues that hold us back. We still have not broken all the way through the glass ceiling. We still are striving to do that.
Thank you for joining us as we explore the untold stories of Black women during the women's suffrage movement. My hopes as the producer of this film is that you challenge yourself to dig back into the history of the women's suffrage movement, both the told stories and the untold stories. And collectively as women, we create the future that we want for our daughters and our granddaughters. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Katie Haw.